Would you welcome the panel, the CEO of Realeague Limited? Jay Lee is here. From EverPass, Derek Chang. From Tiia Consulting, David Crocker. And our very own moderator from Branded, would you welcome Brittany Lee? Give it up, please.
All right, everyone, let's talk about basketball. Let's start with some survey first. How many of you play basketball? Raise your hands. Oh, all right. How many of you watch basketball games? That's a lot. How many of you watch Asian basketball games? All right. Wow, we have a lady who's in the house who just does it all. Well, great. It's great that we haven't seen that many hands. That's why we have all these gentlemen who have been in basketball for such a long time, involving Asia and China for the past decades, to come here to talk about why Asian basketball matters. So I'm really happy because some of them I feel like who I've met before, but just haven't seen them for ages. But let them introduce themselves. Jay, start with you.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. My name's Jay Lee. I'm the CEO and founder of Realeague, a new company that was founded in Hong Kong last year. Even I might be the youngest among three of us, but I've actually had a longer career in basketball than Derek. I've been in basketball for 15 years, starting with my first job, even my internship. So I was in New York working for the NBA League office, and then I was Yao Ming's chief of staff and head of marketing and strategy for the CBA, the Chinese Basketball Association. And then I started an anime company that created China's first original basketball anime, invested by Joe Tsai, who also worked very closely. I'm also the managing director of Joe Tsai Basketball Scholarship, a philanthropy project that we sent Chinese high schooler to the US for high school on our pay bill. And also, lastly but not least, I created Realeague last year. It's a company, it's a sports holding company that we're committed to invest and operate in pan-regional sports competition, basketball competition in Asia, and we want to unlock the potential of Asia basketball.
Wow, such an overachiever, Jay. David, you're up next.
Well, I've just achieved my lifelong goal. So after 20 years of working in executive sport, firstly as the CEO of a national sporting organisation, and then having about 8 years as a director for investment and development strategy for the Australian Institute of Sport. And then my last 11 years I've been with FIBA. Firstly as an executive director, and then the last 4 years I've spent as the chief executive of the FIBA World Cup, which was here in Asia, Japan, Indonesia and the Philippines. And my lifelong dream was to bust out, start my own consulting firm. So I'm now out there in the market with Tiia Consulting. So it's been a great year, and we're ready to launch off.
Very exciting stuff. And Derek.
Hi guys, how are you? Jay did point out that I'm a lot older than he is, which is unfortunate. But it also means I've had a long career, and mostly in sort of media and sports-related ventures. So was in the U.S. for a long time with a lot of pay TV operators like TCI, which was the biggest cable company in the U.S. for a long time, and then DirecTV. Had a long career there also. And in between, helped start the New York Yankees Sports Network. Ultimately ended up in China running the NBA's business in China for a couple of years, where I met Jay. And then over the last few years have picked up a portfolio of various activities, including just starting a new company last year in partnership with the NFL and Redbird Capital, and recently TKO, which is the owner of UFC and WWE, to deliver premium sports content into bars and restaurants. I'm on the board of a small US-based sports agency called Playfly Sports, which is predominantly in the college representation business as well as in the media sales business. I've just started an engagement with a small VC firm called Powerhouse Capital, which is a US-based VC firm investing in early stage growth in the sports industry. And then finally, the reason I'm actually here this week is I'm on the board of Liberty Media, which owns Formula One and a big chunk of Live Nation, and we're in the process of acquiring Dorna, which is MotoGP. So
Wow, that's a lot of titles, Derek. But
I try to keep up with Jay. It's hard.
try to give up the J. I love the competition. So here today we are talking about basketball in Asia. I am Chinese, so when I was in China, my limited amount of knowledge around basketball is around CBA and the NBA. But today we're talking about Asian basketball. So, gentlemen, please share me what is the current state of Asian basketball.
I'll tip off. As you might know, basketball is popular in Asia, right? Especially in East Asia, where I come from. I was just in China when Steph Curry was there. Actually, I came here for All That Matters and had to miss my dinner with Steph Curry.
Wow, such an honor, Jay.
It was unfortunate, but
I know we all feel honored.
I tried to make both, but the typhoon really messed up everything. But Steph Curry was in China for about 5 days. He literally paralyzed 4 cities. The police department was like in hell whenever he went, because they couldn't control the fans, how crazy they were when they see Steph Curry. I know the NBA is here. Kudos to the NBA who did a great job in the past 30 years, 40 years, promoting basketball in Asia. So they did a great job, especially East Asia. So basketball is popular. That's the most important headline. But also, I think there's still a lot of potential to be grown out of basketball in Asia. The fandom is there, the economic interest is there, but the product, the local product, is not quite there yet. The NBA is very good at bringing preseason games to Asia, a couple games a year, but that's not enough. Of course, people are watching NBA games, FIBA games, all on TV, on streaming, but again, to be able to go to a game, that's a difference. So I think my point of view is, the state of basketball in Asia is very good, but still a lot to be done.
David?
Yeah, if I can just add the release last week at Basketball Matters from FIBA, their 4-year research on fandom in globally, and certainly the top 4 nations for FIBA globally, for fans, 16 to 29, are all in Asia. And everybody would say, yes, the Philippines, of course, big market, they love their basketball, crazy, it's a religion. But one of the big movers, which was really fascinating, was Indonesia, who's now number 1 as a fan market for basketball in Asia, 16 to 29. And then, of course, China is a big market, number 3. And then the UAE has come in also in the top 4. So there's certainly been a really big push in the last 4 years for FIBA in this particular area for international basketball and fans of basketball in the zone.
I'm a big fan of less is more, and so these guys have covered most of it, so I think I'll let you go ahead and ask next.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting. I think, Jay, you've talked about the potential of basketball in Asia, leveraging the guys like Steph Curry from the NBA, from the States, but definitely, we have a lot of homegrown heroes, right, from across different nations in Asia. In China, of course, we have Yao Ming. In other regions, we definitely have their local heroes as well. With such great potential and opportunities, right? Can we dive a little bit deeper in terms of, what are these growth potentials and how do we maximize on them? Yeah.
I think, when we think about basketball in Asia or anything when you talk about sports and stuff and you talk about what's the potential, I think you also have to think about it on 2 vectors. One is just sort of what's the potential of the development of the sport, right? And the other is the commercialization of that sport, right? So when you think about basketball, and I didn't run the stuff in Asia per se, I was running what we were doing in China, but in China and in Asia did a lot of grassroots sort of building the sport. And one of the things from this tournament this past weekend here, the ICC, which FIBA held, I learned that in Singapore right now, basketball is one of the fastest growing sports from a participation standpoint. And then you flip over and say, okay, what's the commercialization potential? And that's almost completely different question. They're not untied per se or disconnected in that. One of the things I'm sure Jay and David will tell you from all the research is that the biggest sort of predictor of of engagement with a sport is whether or not you participate in that sport, right? The affinity for the sport. And so I think growing the grassroots is big. I think from a commercialization standpoint, again, a different question, and a lot of different parties involved, and whether it's sort of people like FIBA, the NBA, or sort of local governments, local businesses, you have to think through how it becomes more of an engagement vehicle, right? An entertainment asset. And I think that's sort of the conundrum here, which is your basketball, professional basketball in Asia, the best league is clearly the NBA. And so, like anything in the world, when you're thinking about entertainment, people always want to see the best, and they're willing to pay for the best. You're not going to have that here. So I think you have to figure out what your aspirations are and how to moderate towards that.
Just to echo what Derek said, right? So I think at least three of us are business people. You're probably not yet. But my point is commercialization is the key word, right? I often ask myself a question, I also ask my friends a question, right? Competition and commercialization, they're both very important aspects of a good sporting event or good sporting IP. Does one come first, the other one come later, or they should be present at the same time, right? Which one is more important? We're taking Formula One as an example. It's a great partnership between FIA and a company that is owned by Liberty Media, which Derek is on the board for. I mean, do people love the competition, or do people fall in love with the competition because it did so well commercially? So I think that's a question that everybody should think about. And I want to add to one more point, that is, I think to answer your question, original question, I think the problem and the potential how to do it to help Asia basketball to grow is really to motivate the private sector to be more involved and to take ownership in the development. In Asia, it's different from the US, it's different from the Europe. The market is huge, but the infrastructure is still quite not there yet. So I think it's important to motivate the private sector, like us, like a company like Realeague, and many other companies, to take a more active role to build that infrastructure together with all the stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the dangers is always like, what is Asia, first of all, right? It's a continent, but you start talking about basketball in Asia, and that spans, quite a big sort of variety of locations. And so that's a little bit, unfair, and probably not a great way to look at it, because you almost have to go market by market and say, how do you develop that sport here? And the other big danger is, what works in the US or what works in Europe, but you're not going to have that comparable. So you almost have to say, okay, what are, again, back to moderate, or figure out what your aspirations are, looking at what has worked from either a sports standpoint or an entertainment, asset standpoint, and how are you building those. So you almost want to look and draw parallels to other industries, whether it's music, other forms of entertainment. How do you draw that crowd? How do you make it exciting?
David, anything to add on that?
I'm going to follow Derek's less is more. I think these two have
Wow,
cut
I
the
love
topic
these
well.
collaborations.
You used to work for a
and,
federation, so you don't care about these sorts of things.
He used to work with federations. But I think, Jay, you've touched upon a really good point in terms of the private sector, right? And how do you feel like, how does your business actually help to push, this, make the private sector and realize this more, and creating something that's not only, great for basketball, but also has a great entertainment sort of aspect to it as well.
So in my view, the biggest challenge that East Asia basketball faces is really the discrepancy between the level of competition and the vast commercial interest. So everybody comes to East Asia for the commercial opportunities, right? But nobody is really here to help and grow healthy, sustainable competition system that could be commercially viable and also helping the nations and the countries to get better at basketball and eventually, do better at Olympic Games. We look at how many qualification seats are available to Asia. As big as Asia is, I think Asia is competing for 2 spots in the Olympic Games. and Australia is in the mix because Australia already automatically is qualified for one because they're so good. And then, by the way, David's Australian. But then, the rest of the entire Asia continent is competing for one spot in the Olympic Games. That seems to be a little off to me.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
such
but
a
I
big
think,
challenge.
you need a competitive Olympic Games. So if you look at who then win, not just wins, but sort of who are the most competitive nations, that goes back to the development piece, which is a long-term sort of investment. But if that is going to happen where you're going to end up with more slots, then you need the quality of play to improve, which means you need the investment coming into these various countries and how that happens from a grassroots standpoint to a professional standpoint is important.
Yeah, but in terms of investments, I mean, in some countries across Asia, right, like the Philippines and China, like you said, grassroots, like the kids just playing basketball wherever they go, right? It's not about just playing the balls, but also about the culture, the fashion, everything that comes with it. But what about for, other countries? Maybe basketball is not the number one sports over there, right? Like Japan's probably baseball, right? How do you actually help them to make that realization that, basketball is, we should make it very strong in the region?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting dynamic, as you say, all across Asia. It's very, very different from the Gulf into Central Asia, across here into East Asia. And the challenges are really diverse. And some of it is absolutely cultural in the way that sport, is played out in those countries, and whether it's education comes first, the role of sport in developing people, in developing youth. There's still an evolution in some of that thinking in different countries. But we have a lot of leading nations across Asia who are winning the battle in the sporting system. And particularly, again, in that youth level, it's the number one sport in a whole lot of countries for youth participation because it's both male and female. And I think that the opportunities that we continue to need to develop is also about this pathway for young women to be able to participate in our sport in an equal manner.
Yeah. I mean, keep in mind, too, though, it's not just the participation, right? It's the training, it's the development, all that. If you look at the U.S., I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I would argue that football is probably the, most popular participation sport at that youth level. But, I mean, the women's team has been phenomenally successful. The men's team, 30 years later, 40 years later, we're still struggling, right? So how do you get to that sort of elite level? There's a lot that goes into it that beyond. You just got to start someplace, certainly, but how you create that process. And look, Jay, when I was with Jay in China, that Yao now is 16 years removed from the 2008 Olympics when China went to the quarterfinals, right? And how many Chinese players have come out to the NBA since then? Probably one or two, right? And so one of our challenges in China was, hey, the NBA is hugely popular, but how do you sustain that growth? How do you sustain that popularity? And one of the best ways to do it, certainly from a marketing standpoint, is if you actually had Chinese players. And the system itself was not producing those players. And Joe and Jay, to his credit, are working on a scholarship program where, they're trying to figure out what that development path is. So the complexities there, it's not as simple as just build a court, have the ball. It's definitely the start of it, but you've got to figure out what the training is and what the development efforts are.
Right, absolutely. I think especially in China where the hardware is there, right? We can build the world-class sort of basketball court over there. But like you said, the training itself, right, it definitely poses a challenge. When it comes to that, Jay, do you have an answer? Does Realeague answer that, provides a solution, or you're working on it?
Yeah, I think, Realeague is a company. I think it's the first time I heard anybody in Asia, at least, to say, oh, we want to build a sports holding company committed to unlock the potential of Asia basketball. I think we're probably the first one. Of course, there are the global players like the NBA, like the FIBA. But to be an original Asian company, I think that's the first time. And what does that mean? It sounds very, vague, unlock the potential of Asia basketball. Of course, we're looking at this objective at multiple levels, right? I think at the highest level, we think there's a lack of good products. That is, competition. Good competition will promote level of, competitiveness. Derek mentioned that there's a lack of, Asian players at the highest level. Japan did an amazing job, almost beating France in the Olympic game in Paris a couple of months ago. But still, they didn't win any of the game and was not qualified for the knockout round. So I think in order to help the whole continent to grow better at basketball, you need to build better competition product at the very top level. So what's at the top level? There are already existing leagues out there like CBA in China, B-League who's doing very well in Japan. But still, I think there's a lack of good, sustainable pan-regional competition products out there. So we want to invest, incubate, and operate pan-regional competitions in pan-Asia or East Asia level. And hopefully the competition we put together is club-friendly, is commercially viable among many of the key features that we want to at least have from the onset. It's important to have, we've all mentioned China, how crazy China is about basketball, and how many basketball events happen in China literally every day, right? And so it's important to have China as part of the puzzle from day one. I think that's also very important because China does have the economic power to fill the success and the health of product like that.
And speaking of having competition across APAC, Jay, would you like to announce the news that, the latest competition that you're going to launch?
Well, it's not quite a news yet. We're still, our focus, so we're a very young company, right? We're a very young company. We actually got our seed money investment from Alibaba last November. So we've been around for less than a year so far. But we did put together a conference, which Jasper might consider a competitor. No, I'm kidding. In Macau this past February. It was very successful. And that was the first thing, our debut as a company. But we're not in the business of sports conference. We're in the business of making sports competition exciting and commercially interesting for a lot of brands, partners out there. So now my priority right now, and also with David's help, David is my advisor as the managing director of Tiia Consulting. We want to build good prototypes that could work maybe in more full-fledged form in the future. So next week, we're actually hosting the first ever APAC Women's Basketball Challenge in Haikou, China. I don't know how many of you have been to Hainan province in China, but it's actually a free trade port, which you don't need a visa to go to. So
Kanye West just had his concert over there,
exactly.
right?
Kanye West just had his concert, first time ever in China, probably. I mean, he's a very controversial guy, so but he was. It was a full house. Everybody was rapping with him, and it was quite amazing. I wished I could be there as well, but I had to be here. But
again, honored. We're so honored.
Maybe just to add around the women's product, the reality is that in the top 10 nations in women's world basketball, 3 are Asian. So you've got China sitting there at number 3. You've got at number 7, I think at the moment, Japan. Australia at number 2 as an APAC. But then just outside that group, you've got Korea. So there is absolutely a real hotbed of real strength of women's basketball based here in Asia. And now the opportunity for more games at a club level to try and grow that, we think there's a nice basis there to build from.
Right. I think this is absolutely amazing. As a woman, I think Realeague is able to have a big focus on women basketball, especially your first competition, right, is around the female competition. So
yeah, and if you look, I mean, right now, investment in women's sports is probably one of the biggest growth areas globally, right? And you look at what's going on in the U.S. and these franchise values for the WNBA teams or the women's soccer teams and stuff like that. It's incredible to watch, and it's great. And I think and frankly, since no one really has crack the code here and sort of figure out what the right strategy is. Maybe that is one strategy to take where you almost leapfrog because as David pointed out, at the national level, national team level, you actually have, examples of that success.
Right. So we have successful stories there, and then also I'm sure, Jay, you're very creative of creating something with uniquely, that belongs to you. We only have 5 minutes left, but let's look forward, to the future in terms of Asian basketball. What do you envision in the next 5 to 10 years? What is going to happen to Asian basketball?
If you gave the 5 minutes to me, I could speak, non-stoply. But
you could take the whole hour probably.
No, just to add on what our women's event is about. So we have actually 4 teams coming to Haikou. One of the top clubs from WCBA, and one of the top clubs from Japan, one of the top good club from Korea, and also one of the top clubs from New Zealand. So it's a very good mix of Asia Pacific representations, and all in Haikou, Hainan province. And we are trying to again demonstrate. I mentioned that we want to be a club-friendly operator of competitions. We want to make them feel comfortable when they're traveling, and when they get to the place where we have competition. We want them to have the best time of their lives, and we want the competition to be good. And so that's kind of what we are trying to do with our women's event. I think, to echo our theme, both men's and women's basketball really matter in Asia. So, we think, we want to be, investing into, because literally we're investing millions into, we're not even, it's hard to start kick off with a lot of commercial success. So we're investing our own money into it. And, Hainan was hit by a typhoon, the biggest typhoon in recent decades. And we've pledged to donate all our tickets proceeds to the relief effort of the region. So, we want to be a socially responsible company from day one. That's also our long-term commitment to the region and to develop basketball in the region.
Yeah, if you look out 5 years and from an aspirational standpoint, I think, and this is a great week to look at this because there was the ICC finals this past weekend, and then there's the F1 race. And I think the gulf between what that was, which is a great event, the basketball tournament, but what F1 is huge. Right? And are you going to close that gap? No, there's certain differences in these events that's never going to happen per se. But from an aspirational standpoint, what can you point towards? And I think having people like Jay and David focused on the region and sort of their relationships, the ability to bring together sort of the commercial elements with the sponsorships, the basketball elements with, again, their relationships, and sort of a very hyper focus on what it means to develop basketball in this region is great. And I think you need these guys to do it. You need other guys to do it. You probably want to have it happen in a coordinated fashion, because I think if it's fragmented, then no one gets any of the attention. And that's a danger in a region like this when there's not enough money, frankly, to support all this stuff. But ultimately, if you can get to an F1 sort of standpoint. Look, we're all here. All that matters, you've got a Milken conference, you've got a crypto conference, you've got a private equity conference, and it's all built around F1 being here this weekend, right? And so if you can sort of have these events in the region, it's not going to be the F1 race in Singapore, but that people are talking about saying, hey, I want to be there for whatever reason, that is something that will be a marker of, hey, there's been success here in this region.
David?
I think the point of the region becoming more harmonious, being able to really have a shared long-term vision. And I think that's where it needs entities like this and others to be able to keep pushing the boundaries, keep setting really big objectives for the sport, and then bringing the national federations in particular along. They're institutions, they have other responsibilities and roles, but they need other parties to push the boundaries and join on and take it. So I think the potential to join it all together, it is really diverse, different levels of sophistication. but it takes a big vision and the support of those federations with partners to make it happen.
Lastly, I also want to quantify, the vision, right? I think hopefully in 5 or 10 years, right, there will be at least 15 players playing in the NBA from Asia. I think just want to shout out a big name, right? A big target. And in Asia, there will be one, at least basketball company that it was worth $1 billion valuation. So that's probably the aspiration.
Jay does not lack for confidence.
I love it. I love the commitment. I love the investment and real league, real talk. Thank you so much, Jay, David, and Derek. I got a game to catch,
Thank
All right,
you.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.